I believe, with some very dynamic speakers. But we put our heads together, the planning committee did last year, to decide what do we think would be the most dynamic way to kick off this season. And so with us here today for advancing your PR career, I'm going to introduce our panelists in reverse order and how they will present. So first off on your screen, we have Carolyn Smith, Casertano. Carolyn, if you'll do a little wave of the hand there. All right. Carolyn is a professor of practice in the communication department at the University of Arizona's Tucson campus. She's also our regional representative for the North Pacific and Western districts of the PR Society of America and vice chair of the PRSA Communications Committee for our America Educators Academy at the national level. Previously, she worked for the American Cancer Society as their national PR director, organizational communications manager, and communications strategy managing director. She, as well as several other PR positions, I believe, while you're there, Carolyn. Like Kelly and some of you, she owns her own PR business for more than a decade. She is APR certified through the PR Society of America, and we will hear more about the APR advantage from her when she speaks to us. So thank you for joining us today, Carolyn. In the middle seat today is our own Staci West. Staci, give a hand wave there. Thank you. From the Mid-Columbia chapter. Staci is the communications manager at Bechtel's waste treatment plant here in the Tri-Cities. Prior to Bechtel, Staci worked at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory as a marketing communications manager and a media relations manager. She got her start in journalism as a reporter for both the Issaquah Press and our own Tri-City Herald. She has served on various community boards and currently volunteers as a board member with Bechtel's Political Action Committee. So thank you, Staci, for joining us today. And leading off today's panel is Kelly Guenther. He is the creative director of the Guenther Group in Seattle. Kelly, I am pronouncing that correctly, am I not?
Yeah, it's Guenther.
Guenther, fantastic. Of the Guenther Group in Seattle. And that's a business that's been thriving and growing for nearly 22 years, if I have that right. He has also worked as a creative services project manager and executive communicator for Accenture, as a video specialist for the cloud-based Shoots company, an investigative reporter for both King TV and Northwest Cable News, a reporter for KMTR TV in Salem, and he started out as communications director for the environmental communication firm O'Neill Company. Kelly, it is very good to have you with us today as well.
Thank you.
I'm your host, Mike Paoli, co-president and on the planning committee for PRSA. Handling our Q&A today is Linda Isakson. Linda, give a little hand wave there. Linda is also on our planning committee for PRSA. And what we're going to do today is we're going to ask you to put all your questions in the, well, you don't have to, but if you're most comfortable that way, put your questions in the chat. And Linda's going to be monitoring that. And she may interrupt the panelists if the timing is just perfect, but otherwise we'll wait for all three panelists to finish up and we will get to your questions. Since we're on screen as well, we can see if you raise a hand and want to join in directly. Linda's going to help us manage all that. We'll essentially be taking over the final third of today's presentation so we can get all your questions answered. When that's done, we'll thank the panel, tell you about our next event, and we'll have you all back to work or whatever it is you plan on doing today by the end of the hour. So with that, let me introduce Kelly to kick us off on the topic of advancing your PR career. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it. Okay, so anybody who hasn't turned on their camera, I know you may not want to, but I've got a question right off the top because I'm the one who's going to be leading off with talking about leading your going out and possibly considering doing your own business. I'm going to try to get to a view so I can see a gallery view here real quickly. So of the people out there, how many of you have considered actually going out on your own, either doing comms or PR? Show of hands. Okay, there's a few folks out there. What I'm gonna do to support me, I'm just gonna basically, I've got a slideshow I'm gonna go through and just kind of, I'll probably scorch through a few things, but to give you an idea of what I have considered in the last 21 plus years of doing it myself, and how I went about doing it. So let me go ahead and pull up a slide to show you. And can you see that, Mike? Is it coming through okay? Perfect. Okay.
Good. So, good to go.
So let's do this. So Guenther Group, what it is basically I was at King. I was running the investigative unit. They decided to reorg everything that was going on at the time. And I had to decide whether I wanted to stay in TV news, whether I wanted to, and also whether I wanted to do public relations full time, or whether I wanted to do public relations and possibly figure out a way to tell stories again. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, because I'd been kind of tired about corporate newsrooms. I ran the investigative unit. I worked with the King 5 investigators, and several of my stories have been railroaded because of concerns about, I know everybody thinks, oh my gosh, they wouldn't have done that all that time ago, but yes, they did. And I ran into some problems with trying to get some investigations actually on some car dealerships, which are huge advertisers for TV news. And so I said, do I really want to keep doing this? And I said, well, I can always fail. And I started out doing my own thing. So that's how Guenther Group came about. There's a lot of things to consider when you go on your own. It is a lot of work, especially at first, it's a lot of work. But then it's amazingly gratifying, especially if you have a family, kids, whatever else, and being able to do what you do on your own time when you're doing it, all those things, it's can be amazingly gratifying. But there are a number of things to consider, and going out on your own and how you're going out on your own certainly has changed in the last 20 years, especially on some things you may not have considered. So the things I would like you to think about if you're thinking about this are your benefits, your home office arrangement, and could a spouse or a partner make your life easier? And by that, I mean, do you have a spouse or a partner who can take care of your benefits versus buying those benefits on the open market? And this is a real, it's a big deal, because it's a huge expense of a small business. It truly is. And it's just gone up every darn year I've owned my own business. The open market for healthcare is expensive, and dental. Expensive. You may never have benefits as good as your full-time job if you don't have that help of a partner or spouse. So that's something to consider. Also, do you have a fully outfitted home office already, such as a printer, a good setup for remote meetings, things along those lines? Also, in PR, especially, let's say you're doing crisis comms or something, having a home office that is not in the kitchen, that is actually in a place where you can, when the client's screaming at you and freaking out and swearing and everything else, you are in your own space to be able to handle and take care of that person and do things without it being in necessarily a public space. So it depends on the types of PR and or comms consulting, et cetera, you're doing, but it's important, and it's important for you to think about it. I'm always going to suggest that you should always be a bit of a diplomat, because you never want to burn bridges, because your past employers, your past coworkers, they can be the greatest source of work for you as you're starting out and in the future. I mean, I was talking with Mike about this. I have a project tomorrow, and I'm flying to San Jose for another part of it. And this is literally with a woman that I worked with in the special projects unit 22 years ago at King. And I have ex-King people come back to me time and again to do work for them. So just think about never burning your bridges. Also, tuck up money away beforehand. If you're feeling like maybe a layoff's coming, if you're part of the Great Resignation, whatever it might be, and you're going to possibly get unemployment, then leverage that unemployment money. Like I said, they reorged our special projects unit. I had a job offer on the table from Salt Lake City to run their investigative unit. And I said, no, I'm going to take this little golden parachute I got and possibly unemployment, and I'm going to go ahead and start myself out. And that's what I did, and how I leveraged. That's how Guenther Group came into being back in 2001. You should also think about dabbling into freelance work and doing this in addition to possibly your full-time job, because you can see how much you like it. You can see what kind of gigs are out there for you, what kind of work's out there for you, and how much you enjoy doing it. Also, begin networking now. Just, I mean, you may not, it's interesting. There are other groups out there. It's not just LinkedIn. There's another one called Alignable, but there are these networking groups. In fact, somebody asked me to join one called Networking for Introverts yesterday, which I found interesting. But there's a ways for you to network, even if you might be more of an introvert. After 20 plus years of doing this, your contacts, your personal contacts, your friends, your past coworkers, and networking your tail off are going to be the greatest source of new work and ongoing work. PRSA is great for this. I literally, that's how I ended up being part of PRSA, is I got involved in our North District Conference, and my employer asked us to, he said, well, let's go ahead and have a booth there. And from there, another one of my coworkers, Jackie Coe, who used to be the president of PRSA Puget Sound, pulled me in and said, hey, I'd like you to be on the board. So it's great for this. So is LinkedIn. You should fine tune what your LinkedIn page is saying and consider making it non-company specific, but more you specific and your skill sets. And by that, I mean, here's a shot of my LinkedIn page. And what I'm doing is I'm putting my skill sets up at the top. I'm also beginning connecting with people. You can see that I've got over 2,600 connections. I'm constantly, well, fairly regularly, at least weekly, posting on LinkedIn about what's going on and having things that are relevant and or takeaways, tips, tricks, etc., that might help other communicators or public relations professionals. And then you want to start following people. You want to start following people in companies that could possibly benefit you in the future, or companies that you actually believe in. One thing I will say you really need to do is you really need to have a website, and it's not as hard as you may think it is. A basic website is perfectly fine. Now, while it may not drive new business, people use websites to check you out, to basically find out, are you the real deal? And also to check out your work if you have a portfolio or some examples of things you've done. So they check you out. So I'd say it's pretty essential. Websites now are like, for instance, Mike was talking about WordPress being a total pain in the tail. Well, I moved away from a WordPress website. I went to a fairly cheap and easy to use modular solution called Squarespace. There's other ones, Wix and MailerLite. You can check out guenthergroup.com to see what I did there, and the learning curve wasn't terribly steep. This is the splash page or the homepage of Guenther Group. We just decided, I mean, when I was at, shooting in Governor Gregoire's office a couple of years ago, I just threw that up there. And it's something that you can do, and it doesn't cost that much money. All right. Also leverage digital tools. When I say that is that we have so many new tools that do such amazing things for us, but we may not know all of the things that they actually can do, all of the bells and whistles hanging off of the tools. You do want to create an email list of some kind of potential clients and people you want to reach out to and or talk with, in addition to just start doing coffees with these folks, seeing them in person. I've started to also do coffees, Zoom coffees, and remote ones when it's a pain for them. But I have to tell you, the power of meeting with somebody in person and talking a little bit about, some of the wacky stuff that you've been doing during the pandemic or whatever else, breaking down that barrier and actually getting away from your computer and your desk and seeing somebody in person and buying them a coffee or a lunch there's just the payback is very different than just doing it in a remote fashion, in my opinion. So also the most powerful way to market and land clients besides networking, my opinion, is, well, not my opinion, statistics show it. It happens to be old fashioned. It's email marketing. So creating a newsletter or a regular update on what you're doing is a great idea. And there are a lot of options out there. There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, so shop around. Some, like for instance, Constant Contact and MailChimp were acquired just in the last couple of years, have become a lot harder to work with. Customer service is not nearly as good, so shop around. And then if your email list is small enough, oftentimes if it's, somebody just raised their hand, but if somebody could tell me, let me pause for a second there. Jenny, I think it was you that raised your hand. You want to turn on your mic and ask your question?
Sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, no problem. That's okay. I'm just, my thing is that I like this to be, instead of me just doing this one way, it's perfectly participatory. But if your email list is small enough, many times it's 500 or less than 1,000. You can use email marketing for free. I am in fact using an email program and marketing for free, and it's called MailerLite. This is in fact my latest one. One thing I suggest you do is you really put in a lot of visuals. I make it so that people can scan through it in about 2 minutes. I put in hot links to work I've done. I always put a tip in there. I always do something that's going to benefit them in some way. And those tips that I put in there, they're the ones that where I get the greatest amount of feedback. So it's while you're talking a little bit about yourself, you're also helping them on a professional level, and you're reminding them. For me, I don't do it too often, in my opinion. I do it on a monthly basis and no more than that, because I have literally gotten rid of other newsletters and or email check-ins I get from people when they hit me more than on a monthly basis, because I just don't want to see it that much. That's my opinion, but I think frequency, too much frequency, is not a good thing for you. So leverage those digital tools I was talking about and also amplify them. I mean, it's interesting to find out what's out there. LinkedIn actually offers a feature for newsletters. And about a month ago or 2 months ago, one of my friends said, "Hey, dummy, they have this newsletter feature. You can actually amplify that way." So given that I have all these connections, I know a lot of people in the C-suite. I mean, I used to be a trainer that went into all of these huge companies all over the North America. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I put it on LinkedIn? And so now it's in a much larger forum, and it's shows that your thought leadership, and you really should possibly take advantage of doing it. Here is the LinkedIn newsletter I pushed out for the first time last month. And to give you, now it's not going to be as pretty as the other ones that you have. Design wise, it's very limited, but from for the way to amplify it, and from an amplification viewpoint, it's huge. Just by pushing out the newsletter for the first time, I now have 300 subscribers on LinkedIn. So that's something to consider. And all I did was push out a newsletter, and they've trusted my past LinkedIn posts, so they subscribe to the newsletter. Be Zen. I have not been, most people that know me professionally would say that I am type A and I'm not terribly Zen. As I've gotten older and grayer, I have become much more Zen. So I think approaching this with a very Zen mind space, because you need to be really balanced in doing this, because building your own website, using free digital tools, finding out about them, learning how to use them, and how to leverage them, it all takes time, and it takes a lot of patience. So don't let this stuff be overwhelming. Do it in little teeny chunks. And also, as business coaches say, be intentional. It takes a lot of planning and thought to do this. If it's something you're thinking about, you can do those baby steps now to start going that direction. And finally, I've also had a couple business owners hit me over the head and say, "I'm literally sending you, Kelly, I'm sending you some free books so you can start reading up on this stuff, because I really, there are new ways to do marketing for yourself, and you need to be aware of them." So a couple of them, one thing, I've got two to recommend to you. One is Seth Godin's This is Marketing, to get to the heart of how you sell yourself and your services. And it's a great, easy reading book. I'm rereading it right now while I sit on the treadmill and other places at the gym while I'm doing my cardio. And it's just great. It's stuff that just sticks in the back of your mind. And then when you're doing a marketing effort of some kind, you're just thinking about what Seth's words are. Another great author with great perspective is Donald Miller, and he's got several books out there, and these are those two books. So finally, that was just, I know I just wanted to rip through this and let you know what's going on, but those are the things I would say that you should consider if you're thinking about going out on your own. And I'll stop sharing now so I can get off my soapbox. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Hey, thanks, Kelly. I know we're going to have some questions following that up. Thanks for giving us the extra reading material. We appreciate that. Staci, I'm going to transfer it on over to you. Can you pick up?
I can.
All
you
right.
got me?
We got you.
Great. All right, good. So let's see. I look a little frozen. Am I frozen, or is it good?
Let me make it bigger on mine. No, you're moving. You're moving.
All right. Good. All right, so thank you first for asking me to participate. It's great seeing some of the friendly faces, folks I know from around town. You know, I was thinking about what I wanted to share today, and I think for myself, I want to make it clear that I never had a plan. So I am not the kind of person who put together a 5, 10, or 15-year plan. My mother told me I should have a plan, and being the contrarian I am, I didn't listen to her. I went to Central Washington University in Ellensburg and studied print journalism and political science. I always wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and 30 years ago, that was a great goal. I think the world is much more challenging these days in that way. Out of college, I started as a newspaper reporter at a weekly in Issaquah outside of Seattle, and then at the Tri-City Herald, like Mike said. And frankly, I quickly learned that I didn't like working 50 hours a week for less pay than a starting teacher. And in fact, no one ever said thank you. All they did was complain about what you wrote. So there was definitely interest on my end when a woman I met in the community suggested I apply for a job out at Pacific Northwest National Lab. I did. I started there as a media relations specialist and had a great mentor. Many of you know her, Dawn Zimmerman. She pretty much taught me how to do media relations, and literally within 4 months, I was meeting in New York and DC with reporters at Business Week, the networks, scientific trade publications, Popular Mechanics, and learning how to pitch and follow through, and absolutely loved working with reporters. If I couldn't work at the New York Times, I at least got to work with the reporters there. So I was at PNL for 17 years and had a lot of different roles there. And I'll talk a little bit about what drove me to take different positions. I kind of want to share the top 5 things that that looking back, I think made a difference for me in being able to move to different roles, but also move up as was part of my goal. And so happy to answer questions about any of these, but one, I think, strength of mine is having been a young reporter. I had a outsized sense of my own importance, which in some ways can be a negative, but at the same time, it meant I could hold my own in a room of national security experts, and had less concern with sharing what I call courageous counsel. So I think one hallmark that I've brought to different roles is not being afraid to tell leaders what I think they need to know in order to make good decisions. And I always tell them my job is not to tell them what they want to hear, but to make sure they hear all sides and have all the information, because they're the ones at the end of the day who have to make the decisions and are accountable for those decisions. I love sharing information and connecting the dots. And so as I get to know my internal customers or my colleagues and those I work with and collaborate with, if I see information that I think would be of interest to them or connect dots on different opportunities or can introduce people to each other, I love doing that. And I think that has served me well in just delivering a message to people that I care enough to have learned about them and their business. But it also expands your network and people start thinking of you because you're thinking of them. From a PR perspective, at least for what I've done, I am envious of what Kelly can do. I am not a video person. I'm not a visual person. I am all about the word. And so for help is strong skills and not being afraid, and in fact, looking for opportunities to write in different ways. So at PNL, after about 3 or 4 years, I was asked if I would write a speech for their director at the time and said yes. And for the next year or two, part of my time was spent writing speeches. And that certainly gave me opportunities to interact with higher level executives, but also learn about different topics and to be able to show that I could tailor my writing for different audiences. And then from me, one thing that I learned from a former director of communications I had was always talk strategy and outcomes and audience before you worry about tactics. It's so easy for us as PR people when we're creative and energetic to want to start brainstorming tactics, or we have a great idea and everyone loves the idea, but that doesn't mean it's effective, and it doesn't mean it's the right tactic for the audience and the outcome you're looking for with that audience. And so for me, I always try to stay focused on that, because when you focus on strategy and outcome, you're also ensuring you're aligned with the business goals. So I'm going to see if we have any questions yet. Nope, nothing more. And so then in terms of the different opportunities I have, ironically, the first opportunity I had for a promotion was because the person they really wanted to take the job didn't want the job. So that was a humbling way to get a promotion. But I absolutely loved the role and learned at that point in my career the importance of having, quote unquote, fire in your belly. If you have fire in your belly for an opportunity and you have that energy and enthusiasm, you may not have all of the skill sets, but you can learn it, or you'll figure out how to get it done. And in that case, I started doing communications and marketing for PNL's National Security Business Unit. I had never worked on brochures or websites. I had no idea there were different thicknesses of paper for brochures. And so at the end of the day, I was having to hire people to do brochures. But the other benefit of being a reporter is nothing wrong with having to, and I learned early on that I be good at what I would want to do is to ask dumb questions. And so I would just hire people and ask them. Well, luckily I had a budget, a small one, but could ask them, what thickness of brochure do you recommend and why? And, why this design over something else? And so for me, I think always trying to focus on what's the goal, what's the outcome we want, versus getting stuck in knowing or not knowing something. And related to that, I've provided this advice to people over the years, is when you go into a new role, don't ever think you're too good to do the small tasks. What I learned with the national security folks at PNL was they needed a lot of time to grow to trust you. And that makes perfect sense given the business they're in. And I think a lot of executives and customers who have us on their teams or hire us, they need to trust us. They're trusting us with their business, with their reputation. And so for me, if the way for me to get their trust and be able to do big meaty assignments was to write the happy 10th anniversary note for the director, then I would. And if you've got TV cameras coming in and you need to get on your hands and knees and tape over the cords so no one trips, you do it. And when your teams or the people you support see you doing whatever it takes to get the job done and not thinking you're better than any of those tasks, I think you earn their respect, but also their trust. And so for me, usually if I'm ever asked, what am I most proud of? It is having earned the trust of people, because when you do that, they give you more autonomy and bring you in to more of those strategic, meaty, complex opportunities. Let's see. And then it was great advice given to me by a good friend of mine. And that is, don't be afraid to take a lateral move, especially if it opens up future opportunities. And so at PNL, I was managing 3 organizational level functions, and we were reorganizing. And I realized that if I wanted to move up, I needed to be able to say I'd managed a website, a brand, and and other external communications that were more marketing than the marketing experience I had. And so I moved over to support a facility where I managed the website, the outreach, social media accounts, conference involvement, and did more audience research. And for me, that definitely filled some gaps and gave me more of a traditional marketing communications experience that I didn't have in my previous roles or from my degree at college. And by moving laterally, I moved out of line management into an individual contributor role, had a matrix team, and it was a great experience. And then my other tip is look beyond your own world for networking and learning opportunities. In the Tri-Cities, it's easy to look just ourselves. And about 10 years ago, I felt like I was, I lived in North Richland, I worked in North Richland, and my view of the world was so narrow. And I joined a women's networking group in town, and it's mostly women who own their own businesses. And I will tell you, a lot of those women know a lot more about marketing than I ever would. And because they're doing it on the front lines, learning their customers day to day. And that's just opened up my world and mentors and coaches that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So I encourage you, don't just look at your competitors for what they're doing, look at completely different industries for what they're doing. And see what you can learn and take away from that. And then a final thought is mentors and coaches. There at Bechtel, I've heard a lot of our executives talk about having a mentor and having a sponsor. And so the mentor is someone, and I've had both here, and I'm grateful for that. The mentors are the ones who can help you work through issues, who might help coach you where you need to grow or improve, might help you with interpersonal conflicts, and can be your advocate. But a sponsor is someone where they are watching actively for opportunities to put you forward for promotions and new opportunities. And so that's important because sometimes that sponsor, you're not going to be having a monthly regular discussion with like you might a mentor, but that sponsor is the one who, when push comes to shove and there's an opportunity you want, they're the ones who will actually call up the hiring manager and say, hey, you've got to talk to this person. And I highly recommend them for that role. And so I've had both, and that's just incredible. And for me, what I've enjoyed the most about all of the different opportunities I've had is by not having a plan, I think I was a little more open to people I met, things that they saw in me, things I learned about myself, good or bad, throughout that process and over the years. And have really come to a place where I've learned my strengths and I plan to play to those. And I don't worry about my weaknesses because those are things that when you bring enough to the table, you can fill in other ways. And a plug, since we talked books, one of my favorite books for personal growth is Strengths Finders by some Gallup folks. And they talk about how you can grow as much as you can imagine with your strengths, but it's harder to fill in the gaps of your weaknesses. So I'll stop there because I think I've gone on much too long.
Oh, that's fantastic, Staci. I'm hearing so far we've got a theme going on with you and Kelly about playing to your writing strengths and writing a lot, marketing, flexibility. So now, Carolyn, let's transfer over to you. And I believe you've got some perhaps more details on how folks can market themselves in a more effective manner, as well as some other topics.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And I just learned so much from Kelly and Staci. So this is so great to be part of this panel because it's fun for me as well. I've got a little bit of a different background, similar to Staci. I had a degree in journalism. I moved to the dark side of public relations, which has been incredible. I've absolutely loved my career. I still love my career. I've worked for a national health organization, the American Cancer Society. I've worked for myself. I've worked for a small integrated marketing communications agency. So I feel like I've had pretty great experience in a wide variety of industry sectors. I will say that now in my current role, it's been 3 years of being in an academic setting as a university professor. It is challenging and rewarding and stimulating. I absolutely love it. I still maintain my consulting practice, which I really value. I think it makes me more relevant as a professor, that I actually am teaching things that I do in my own practice. I focus particularly in areas related to public relations and ethics, and also with crisis communications. And I think, there's 3 areas that I wanted to touch on as far as advancing your PR career goes. And one of them is really about, continuing the learning process. I know for most of us, whether, you're reading the books, as, Kelly and Staci just mentioned, even if you don't, have that 5-10 year plan, I didn't ever imagine that I would end up in an academic environment. I never really intended to go on and get advanced degrees. However, once I sort of realized I was ready for a career change, I was tired of traveling, I was tired of working 24/7, I wanted to do something to give back. Teaching just had a calling for me. And so getting an advanced degree, I will say, if it's a certificate program, a master's degree, a PhD degree, it has opened so many doors for me, both professionally, personally, academically, that I had never even expected. I highly, encourage advanced learning. A plug for PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America. If you're not a member, I strongly encourage you to become a member, and also to take advantage of all of the opportunities. We have some incredible certificate series. There are webinars to attend. We've got, of course, the international conference happening in a few weeks in Dallas, Texas, which is going to be incredible. I'm really excited about it. And then also, consider getting that accreditation. So I was working full time. I had 3 children. I was volunteering. I was traveling a lot, and, it had been in the back of my mind that I wanted to be an APR. I wanted to get that accreditation. Within my sphere of influence, within some of the mentors that I had, people kept talking about this APR and how coveted it was, and how it can really help you advance your career, get more clients, land a promotion, advance your career in that way. And I'll never forget, because somebody in my local chapter said, Carolyn, you're too busy. There's no way you're going to be able to do it. And I thought, oh, I'm going to prove you wrong. And sure enough, I did. And it's just been incredible. So if any of you are interested, APR, advanced degrees, I would love to chat more with you about it. The other thing I have to say is that I think when some of us, we get to a level in our career where I think even without a plan, because similar to Staci, I didn't really ever sit down and go, where do I want to be in 10 years? At the same time, I started to recognize that as I was hiring new employees and I was bringing in the next generation of communication professionals, it dawned on me that there was a real need. There was a gap as far as, providing a mentor and having some of these new employees really, have the skill sets that I was looking for and the talent. Not to say that they were deficient, but just to say that some of them, I felt like, hey, if you could be mentored by X and X person, perhaps within this company, it really might benefit you. So now in my role, I'm the Public Relations Student Society of America. I'm the faculty advisor at the University of Arizona. And I love it when we are able to have our professionals meet with students who are interested in becoming the next generation of PR professionals, communication professionals, and really making those connections together. There's so much value, not just for the students, but also for us, because we keep learning and growing and understanding, how do we do TikTok for our clients? And what does that look like? And where's the ROI? And, similar to what Staci was saying, don't just focus on the tactics, figure out, what does success look like for our clients? And I'm here to tell you today that sometimes our students and this next generation, they've got the finger on their pulse. So being a mentor, even considering be a guest speaker. We always need, all of us, we need guest speakers in our PR classes, our communication classes. Consider speaking at a conference. I'm not sure if that was already mentioned, but there are many PR district conferences happening around the country where you could apply to be a speaker. That's a great way to advance your career, because then, as Kelly mentioned, you go back and put that on your LinkedIn, you add it to your website, you get those testimonials from some of the attendees who, came up to you afterwards. And of course, it's a great way to generate new business and get new clients. I know that has certainly been my experience. So I just talked pretty fast about a number of areas. I did want to leave time for questions. So I will just pause there and send it back over to you, Linda.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you, everyone. This has been great. I see, Kelly, that you answered one of the questions that was put in the chat, but for the benefit of everyone here, just in case some folks missed it, I'm going to ask again. So the question was, do you duplicate the content between LinkedIn and your other newsletter? Referring to what you talked about, creating that LinkedIn newsletter.
So I think most people that know me, some of you do, I speak really plainly, and I have no problem swearing. I'll try to rein in the swearing, but it's a pain in the butt, a pain in the ass to completely be creating new marketing content all the time. Yes, by all means, duplicate it. That is exactly what I did. The formatting layout for LinkedIn is different. The horizontal pictures, the verticals work on the one MailerLite thing, and the horizontal pictures work on the LinkedIn one. And so, but almost everything else is verbatim. And what's really awesome about it is I can cut and paste from MailerLite with the hot links intact into a Word doc, then take those from the Word doc and put them into the LinkedIn, and those hot links are still intact. It's a beautiful thing.
So I'm going to move over to Staci now. Staci, this is a bit of a two-parter because it was a question that I had plus a question that was also asked in the chat. So you were talking about the difference between a mentor and a sponsor earlier. I don't know if it happened for anyone else, but when you were describing the difference, you were kind of cutting in and out a little bit. So I was wondering if you could once again describe the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And then the follow-up question after that is, how do you find the right mentors and sponsors? How do you present this opportunity to them? So.
Yeah, so I see a mentor as someone you're meeting with on a regular basis and helping you work through, maybe challenges you're having in the workplace, areas you need to improve. Maybe it's in addressing poor performance or crucial conversations. And then a sponsor is someone where they know you well, but you may not be meeting regularly and you may not be getting that coaching. And they are the ones, a mentor could do this as well, but a sponsor is someone in a position where they know a lot of people, they have that network, and they're going to proactively advocate for you for opportunities. And so in terms of getting them, I think sometimes it's by default. You find yourself, building a relationship with someone. I've had, I think, mentors 3 times in my career. One I went to, he had been in a group that I'd been in, and so had some firsthand knowledge of my challenges, but didn't have skin in the game for how anything ended up. And so could be more impartial, if you will. And I just went to him and said, I need some help. I'm not sure what to do. And it was a one-off that I asked for, but then it went to multiple regular conversations. The one I have now has actually become a sponsor for me without me asking. You know, if someone starts to believe in you, they may take that on themselves. But I have been listening to, especially Bechtel female executives, you know, we're a male-dominated industry, and the female executives have said, don't hesitate to go and just specifically ask someone to be your sponsor, describe what that means, but don't hesitate to offer them something as well. You know, maybe you can, you know, be helping with one of their projects as a way for them to get to know you and your talents. So that's really the difference. And I think, you know, you just have a different one for different times in your career or your life.
I'm sorry, you cut out just at the end of it again, Staci, just a little bit, but all right. So Carolyn, we have a couple questions for you as well. Can you give a little more detail on how the APR specifically helped you and others advance their careers or advance your career? And how do you determine whether the costs, basically the ROI, how do you determine whether it's worth it for you? And also, how long is that APR process? So, multi-pronged question.
Okay, that's a great question. So the APR process, I took advantage of doing an online study session, and I will put the link in the chat. So there is an online study session you can go through. I believe it's 10 modules, and you work with a group across the entire country. There are experienced APRs who will help you get ready to take the actual proctored test. So getting the APR, it's 3 parts. One is that you have to, of course, complete the application. You've got to make sure you have enough years under your belt of professional PR experience. You have to present, it's called a readiness review. So you choose a comprehensive example of your work. So I did a portfolio from a PR campaign that I had been in charge of when I worked at the American Cancer Society. And then you take the actual, once you pass the readiness review and a group of APRs deems you, ready to sit for the exam, you take the proctored exam, and it's like an hour, 2 hours, and you do it in a site, and it's mostly multiple choice. So that whole part, I want to say, it was almost a year's process for me. By the time I said, I'm doing it, I'm putting in my application, the clock starts ticking. You've got, I believe, a year to complete. And without a doubt, it was an incredible investment of both my time and my money. I got a promotion because I had my APR credential. When I went out on my own, I got clients. I won clients over a competitor. I later found this out, of course, because I had my accreditation in public relations. It's that extra distinction that I think sets you apart as a professional. Certainly there are incredible public relations professionals that don't have an APR and they're doing amazing work, and we all know of them. However, in my experience, it has been incredibly valuable. I believe in the academic setting as well. It has helped me, with street cred with my students, and also, proving my value in other ways, both to my university, to my service, and to my consulting work. Was there another part of the question I missed?
I think you hit it though. It was how do you determine whether it's worth the investment, the time cost? So yeah.
Yeah, I think and there's certainly a lot of, every PRSA chapter across the country has an APR designated chair who, can serve as a great resource for anybody. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions offline as well, if anybody wants to talk about it. I know in the Open Digest forum of PRSA, there are people who ask, is there an APR study group happening? Sometimes at the international conference or other district conferences, there's a small sort of condensed half-day APR group who will meet. And, I found a lot of companionship in going through the process with other professionals who were then taking the APR. And when we all passed the test, we had this, celebration, even though we were all over the country, but it was nice to support each other through the process. And in some cases, you can have your own study groups, which, I found to be really valuable, particularly because, during that 12-month time frame, I was traveling, I was working a lot. So I had to really, fit it in when I could.
Carolyn and Linda, I'll jump in to say our chapter does not have a dedicated PR chair, but we are moving in that direction. We're probably an outlier in that regard, but with people like Linda and others who have shown a lot of enthusiasm for getting their APR, we will be getting there. And in the meantime, Carolyn, we might be hanging you out there as a great point of contact for folks until we get it together in the chapter.
Yeah, I think this is Andrea. We also have a couple people in our chapter who are working on their APR. So they could be resources too, or maybe a potential study group.
Also Michelle Haraney from PRSA Puget Sound, and I believe she also serves as the rep on the district, at least she did last year, on the district council, is the APR person, and there are online study groups and an online process. So this is what I remember from last year, but Linda would know for sure.
And you all just got Carolyn's email in the chat. Thank you very much for that, Carolyn.
Certainly.
Thank you. So it looks like we've got another couple minutes. Got a few more questions here. So Kelly, this one is for you. How do you know it's time to make a move from your current, actually, this would be any of our panelists. How do you know when it's time to make a move from your current job? Like, what do you feel are the triggers, I guess?
I'll jump in first. For me, it was, Staci made the comment about she was making less than a teacher, and she was getting abuse from the writing and stuff. And I remember those days, especially my investigations. And the thing for me was to basically realize that I was not getting paid that much money, and I was doing work that was incredibly hard. Digging up dirt on people and having to do these types of things. And I found that when my management team, I found evidence that they were kind of lessening my stories, taking some of the guts out of the stories. That for me was just good, my time when I said, and I had left TV, and I'd been private sector as a comms director before, and I still wasn't making money in TV that matched what I made as a private sector person years before. So that was what it was for me. I was like, you know what? I'm pretty entrepreneurial. It's time.
I can jump in for myself. Let's see, trying to make a living wage and someone actually like what I do was the first time. But I definitely think for me, it was seeing with some reorganizations going on that my scope was becoming more narrow versus broader. And if you want to move up, you need to broaden your scope of operations and management. And I also knew that I was hearing, all of the marketing conversations going on, but I had no marketing experience or background. And still, so that's when I made the leap and took a lateral move. For me, I think the other times it's really, I just find myself bringing ideas forward, like, oh, we could do this as a company, or we could do that. And someone saying, well, that's outside of our scope. And that's a trigger to me of, I am yearning for more impact or more new opportunities or experiences. And so when I do that, I need to stop and think, okay, that means I want something different. And maybe it's something I do in the community with a board, but also it may just be time to look for that opportunity. And, you know, and frankly, one of the thoughts in my head when I left PNL after 17 years was, if I don't leave now, I'll be so far into my career, people may not look at my resume. And we are at a time where being at the same place for 20 or 30 years is not how it goes anymore. And so 20 years ago, if you were bouncing from job to job every 2 years, I think people wondered what was wrong with you. Now, if you're there for 20 or 30 years, are people wondering, well, what's wrong with you? And so that was one of the thoughts in my head. And so I would say, if you're in a role 5 to 7 years and you're not feeling like you're continuing to grow, and being able to add more different things to your resume, look at what else you can do either within that job or what the new opportunities would be.
I would just add that in some cases, it was almost the reverse me. I had reached the point in my career where I had sort of done it all, and I felt myself starting to burn out a little bit. And I also wanted to do more in my community and feel like I was actually contributing back into the environment where I live. And so I took a huge pay cut, quite frankly, to go to the university and become a professor from, you know, working where I was. And yet, it's been incredibly rewarding. I don't regret it for a single minute. And the fact that I can still maintain a private consulting practice is really beneficial. I've just had to switch gears a little bit. And I know that's not realistic for everybody, but I think there does come that day where you think, you know, do I want to keep doing this, or am I ready to consider perhaps going out on my own, perhaps switching careers or industries, or, you know, moving? And it's scary. I had to really lean into the fear and the uncertainty of what the move would mean for me. But, you know, I tell my students this: sometimes you have to do the things that scare you, because that's where you're going to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are at time for questions. So Mike, it's all yours.